That time again. All right. Well, thank you, Rotarians. Oh, and Irv's going to take my picture. Let's see if we get a good one this time. All right. It's silk purse and sow's ear problem is what he complains to me about all the time. Can he be old enough to know that old saying? No, anyway, never mind. All right. We're going to start out with the Pledge of Allegiance. And I was wondering, let's see. Alan, could you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance? Alan's, can you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance? Okay, we need to have a new rule where people with the same exact first name have to sit at least 3 seats apart. We're not going to have that problem again. All righty. Boy, up front here we have, my goodness, we got Michael and Stu and Tim and Dave and Sheila and Trudy and oh my God, a whole bunch of people. So what are you going to sing today? Oh.
Let us know.
You need to tape that to his back here.
Yeah. Okay.
Here I go.
Yeah, you're gonna tell us what.
Well, I didn't pick the song, but this young man next to me picked the song. What are we going to do?
Our speaker is going to talk about LAFCO and cities and special districts in the county. And we thought the song Downtown would be fun to sing from the 60s. Downtown.
Yeah, who's going to be Petula Clark?
Petula.
Tootie.
Petula?
Trudy, you're
Yeah, Petula. Okay.
You're alone, making you lonely, and always so. Downtown, when you can clearly the place to never be cleaned up by road. Downtown, listen to the music on the traffic in the city. Linger on the sidewalk with the neons out for pretty. How can you? The lights so much brighter than you can forget all your troubles, forget all your cares, and you're great. Go find a place for sure. Everything's waiting for you. Hang around and let your problems around. Prepare our movie show. Downtown, maybe you know some places to go where they never close. Downtown, it's certainly the rhythm of the gentle Barcelona. You'll be there to listen all the money's over. Happy again. The lights are much brighter. Forget all your troubles, forget all your cares, and go downtown. It's a great downtown. Downtown, you're gonna be all right now. Someone who is just like you and needs to get around to guide them along. So maybe I'll see you there. Forget all your troubles, forget all your cares. It's a big pretty for you. Oh, when I'm in the dark, everything's waiting for you.
Well, I can't see that far, but I.
Oh,
I
that's.
almost got it.
Okay. Oh, here you go.
All right. Nobody does it like we do. Now, whether that's a compliment or not, you'll have to sort of figure that one out on your own. Michelle, have you a thought for the day? It is not at all, Michelle. That's very interesting. So now you have to figure out, is this the real Michelle? Or is that the real Michelle? We don't know. All right, here we go.
It is a mystery. So I was thinking for the thought for the day, as we head into what's probably a contentious fall with all that's going on in the country, I was thinking about the idea of how being judgmental sometimes that we could take a step back from that. So I have a little story. It's called The Lighted Lamp. So once in a small town lived an old blind man. He was blind, yet while walking out at night, he would carry a lighted lamp with him. One night, while he was out at his house, a group of young travelers saw him. After seeing him, they realized that he was blind. The travelers couldn't understand why a blind person would carry a lighted lamp and started to make fun of him. One of the travelers was very curious and asked, "You are blind and can't see anything, so why do you carry a lighted lamp with you?" The blind man replied, "Yes, I am blind and I can't see anything, but I still carry a lighted lamp with me for people like you who can. If I walk at night without a lamp, one might not be able to see me coming and run into me." They felt ashamed for their behavior and apologized. So the moral of the story on this is we don't always understand why people do things. Don't judge and try to understand.
Wow, that's a good one. A little more understanding is always a good thing. Okay, today helping us with the meeting, we've got Spur reporter Tim Barry, Spur publisher Kathy Coyle, photographer Irv with his wonderful photography skills out there. We've got audiovisual Paul sitting at the table. Sheila has been greeting. Sheila, have you greeted everyone? Did you miss anybody? Careful what you wish for. All right. And our Zoom host is Pat Coyle. Also giving us a hand on the next page. Let's see what's on the next page. Yes, we've got Trex and Bob doing the Sergeant in Arms, except Bob is here and Trex isn't. But maybe Trex is doing it, in absentia. I wonder if you can be a Sergeant in Arms if you're not here. So we have a Sergeant at Arm. All right. We've got Kathy doing double duty as a web wonder. I like it. Every week, just a little something different in the title. And Kelly Bauer is doing our public outreach. Okay. Introduction to visiting Rotarians and guests. Let's start out in Zoom land. In Zoom, Pat, do we have anybody who's a visiting Rotarian or a guest?
President Mark, we have nothing but Rotarians and friends of Rotarians with us here on Zoom.
That was very loud. But what I understood Pat to say is there's only regular old real live Rotarians out there, no visiting ones and no guests. All right. But Pat's turned all the way up. You have to be careful about him. Okay, except for our speaker today, let's start off with visiting Rotarians. Where do we have any visiting Rotarians?
President Mark, we
Yes.
have a visiting Rotarian. This
Okay.
is
Go right.
Gary Harrington from the Pleasanton Club, not Pleasanton North, Pleasanton City Club. Did I get that right? You want to say a few?
All right, and Gary's going to tell us a little bit about what's on your table here. So tell us a little bit about what you're raising money for today, Gary.
Thank you, Mark. And I want to come up here because I like to face it, even though I have to read what I'm going to say. And this is a tearjerker. And what I saw yesterday was so happy that if I break out in tears, I apologize. But I come to, and I'm trying to help a fellow Rotarian, a club member of our club, Mark Tanis. His lovely wife, Christine, had to enter the hospital early last October for surgery on her stomach. Everything went fine, but septic shock set in, which ultimately affected her extremities. There was no question her hands had to be amputated, and they were hopeful to be able to save her feet. Well, she was in the hospital for months. My wife visited her when she got out in December, but everything, was fine. But the question was, were they able to save the feet? No, they had to amputate her toes. And then they had to amputate a little more, and they're trying to save it. They gave her chance to go to the knees and above and get one of those spring things, but she wanted to be healed. And last week, after another surgery and so forth, they said that they were able to save it. They had to amputate, they had to get skin from her upper body and put them on the feet, but they're going to be able to save enough of it so that she'll be able to walk by the end of this year, and we're extremely happy. Nancy, my wife, visited Christine at the rehab facility after her first amputation and couldn't get over the positive attitude Chris had after this tragedy. She wasn't looking at it as a tragedy. All she could think about and express was her frustration of not being able to comb her hair, dial numbers on her phone, or pick up anything. Their health insurance was through Christine's private school employer. She no longer works. Suddenly, Mark is totally physically responsible for their household and needs to care for his loved Christine. Mark is looking into an advanced prosthetics. Psionic has what it looks like to be the best prosthetic hand for his wife. One of these hands would be enough for her to do what she needs. The cost is approximately $45,000. They are not sure if insurance will cover the cost of the prosthetic hand, and they don't know what the additional out-of-pocket costs might incur for both her hands and her feet to be able to walk again. Just think, if you or your spouse suddenly found out that you had no hands and no ability to walk. Remember, this happened without warning. Mark is an extraordinary Rotarian. He has stepped up often to help the club and our projects. Sometimes we think that he is a one-man machine, but a tender-hearted one. We think we should help our own Mark and Christine Tanis. Let's help them by raising this fund for a prosthetic hand. And I'm asking you to help us. So far, like I say, it's $45,000 for one hand. Our club, in a week and a half, and I visited 2 other clubs in the Valley, and I have one more to go to, has raised $23,000, which I'm very, very pleased. You can donate by going online to the Rotary Club of Pleasanton and go to the donation section. And remember, it's called a helping hand. Or those of you that like to write checks like me, the old fashioned way, we write a check and on your table, there's a brochure that gives a little bit what I've said here. And it can be mailed at an address, and any help would be greatly appreciated. And as a fellow Rotarian, you know that we help in the community, we help in the state and in the country and internationally. And now we have a chance to help our fellow Rotarians. Thanks very much, Mark, and thank you, all of you.
Thank you. All right, so I'm going to waive one of the rules here before we introduce our next Rotarians here. So if you want to take your phone out and take a picture of the information on your table, you want to get the name of what you're supposed to do there, please feel free to do that so that we can lend a hand. And remember, it's a fairly easy one, has hand in it. It's a Pleasanton Club. So if you get to type in on the internet, you'll be in pretty good shape there. If you take a picture of what's on the table there, you're in good shape. And I'm absolutely sure that our club can help, because that's a stunning story. And it just helps all of us remember we have chances to help even in our local community, and just to be thankful for all the things we have. All right, do we have any other Rotarians who are visiting us in the room? Any visitors with us today? All right.
President Mark, I would like to introduce my friend Alok Meshwari. Alok and I met in the gym. I was on a bike and he didn't stop talking to me until I responded. So Alok is a safety and leadership, as a business in safety and leadership, and showed some interest to be in Rotary.
Wow, that's great. Okay, everybody, be on your best behavior, because we want to have him think that we're a stand-up group of folks who are nice. Well, that may be too much. Well, do your best. All right, up next.
Okay. President Mark,
Yes.
another guest.
Oh, another guest. I'm sorry.
the-
There we go.
For the second time, it's my pleasure to introduce my grandson, third grader, 8 years old, and my F1 hybrid, Sebastian Franz Ferrucci.
Yay. Thank you, Michael. Boy, if he were just a little older, he'd visit one more time. You could make him a member. All right. Any other visitors out there? Because I'm kind of blind. The light over there is coming in. All right. I think that is it. Are we ready? Let's move on to. I'm sure some. There we go. Whoops. Backing up. We have a new member talk coming up, and I'm going to invite David up to give his new member talk. And in just a moment, we'll display him. But we know what he looks like. He looks just like this. Okay. All right, David.
Thank you, President Mark. I've been here since January. Actually, Dennis brought me in after we met. You know the story in Laos. So I wrote something and I thought how to put my 66 years into 5 minutes, and here we go. I was born in 1958 in a small town south of Tel Aviv, to parents that immigrated from Israel in 1946, 2 years before Israel independence. Both of my parents are Holocaust survivors. My father was in a slave labor camp in Bucharest, Romania, and managed to escape and led a group of about a dozen young people through Europe for 1.5 years until they arrived in La Spezia, Italy. In La Spezia, there was several boats that took immigrants to Israel, and after about several weeks of a strike against the British that controlled Israel at that time before independence, and hunger strike, they managed to get to on a boat and got to Israel. My mother was 16 years old in May 1944 and lived in a small village in the south of Hungary. She and her family were part of 435,000 Jews that were transported in May by the Nazis to Auschwitz. Most were killed in gas chambers. Mom's survival story is horrific and fascinating at the same time, and is one of thousands of those stories that you probably all heard of survivors. The majority of them came after the war to Israel and build the country. My parents owned a mom and pop bookstore in a small town, in that small town, and was an institution there. They served actually the entire town, dozens of schools and thousands of students. As a teenager, I used to go before school to the store and help my parents, and also during school vacation. I was also into sports and arts. I started bicycle racing at the age of 12. And at 16 years old, I was the champion of Israel for the young people on bicycling. Also, I played the trumpet. I don't think I can have a sound out of it today, but it was fun to have both sports and arts at the same time. Rotary was present at home, as my father was in Rotary since I remember, in Ramla, in this small town, and was also the president of the club at that town. So when Dennis said Rotary, I said, well, it's my time. I studied in technical high school, which provided, on top of general education of high school provided, I would call it electrical engineering knowledge, and graduated with practical engineer from high school. And then I moved to the Technion in Israel and finished and graduated there with electrical engineering degree. I served 4 years in the Israeli army, Israeli Air Force. 3 years of those are draft. Today it was 3 years then, today it's 2.5 years for men and 2 years for women. And worked on reconnaissance, a small unit of reconnaissance airplanes. And when Jay Davis spoke about his mission in 1991, it reminded me that in 1981, when the Israeli Air Force struck Oshirak, a nuclear plant in Iraq, I was basically part of bringing that reconnaissance in the 80s and 80 and 81 that enabled a successful strike that year of 1981. I continued to serve in reserves for 16 years after I served in the army. On my work, I've been to several startups. So Israel, there is books around it. Israel is a startup nation. Basically, Israel is the second biggest cluster of startups after Silicon Valley. And I was in several startups. Some of them were acquired by bigger companies like Texas Instruments, for example, that you know. And I moved to Livermore in 2015. I'm leading a business team at Silicon Laboratories today, which is a company that deal with Internet of Things, or what's called IoT today. And we're dealing with the biggest companies in the world. My team with Amazon, Google, Apple, to name a few of those companies. In my spare time, I travel the world, play pickleball with Alok and other people, go to the gym, visit wineries, again with Alok and friends, manage HOA. I'm the president of the HOA in the community here in Livermore where I live, and decided that this is my place and to try and work with you to help the community and do something for the world. Thank you.
Wow. Every time I learn anything about any of you guys, I'm always so impressed that I get to be part of a club that has people like you all in it. So that was an amazing talk. And I'm impressed every time I hear more about everybody in this room, about how their journey was to Rotary, to giving back to their community and their world. So, wow, that was neat. All right, upcoming projects. How many people have signed up for, let's see what's next. Building a bed. Did you? Okay. How many people are gonna? A few more? Okay, great. It looks like we will have a wonderful group out there. We will take pictures. We will have fun. This is one of the few activities that we're going to do as Rotary that doesn't have drinking involved, because there's power tools. There's a reason. There's a reason for that. So anyway, if you have not signed up, this is an amazing project. It'll just be a few hours. If you've never used power tools and you're kind of thinking, well, this might not be for me, you might think about it anyway, because they break these tasks down into little itty bitty tasks. They show you exactly how to do it, and then you do it over and over for a while. So even if you've never held a handheld, drill in your hand, by the end of the morning, you'll be fantastic at it, because it's that repetition thing. All right, well, thank you. That seems like it's going to be great fun. Intermediate Baseball World Series, a number of you threw up your hand saying that you were going to donate to that. We exceeded our goal as far as pledges. We were really close on the collections part. How many people pledged last week? All right, yay, on the big thing. Now, how many people actually gave the money? That's not so bad. Okay, so there's a few more that we actually want. It's the giving part that's important. I mean, the pledging's super nice. We appreciate that a bunch, but it's the actual giving that gets the job done there. So for the last few of you who have not gave, go online. We did figure out a way. Irv, we're all squared away if they go online. So Irv, can somebody give Irv a microphone here? Where is Irv? He's hiding. There he is. Well, if you pledge, we don't want to be bad about that. And the other thing is we did set up a goal and we are going to hit that goal and the club is going to do that. So we are going to sort of give everything we raise. Intermediate Little League is having a bit of a rough year on the sponsorship side. So we're not going to fill their entire hole that they have there, but every little bit does help this particular year. And as I recalled, told you before, our local Little League team is in the World Series. So the winner of this section gets to represent this section. And so we won. And we've done that a couple of times, but not every year is there a Livermore team. So that's very cool. So Irv, if they wanted to give to the foundation, remind them of how they would do it online.
Online.
Yeah.
So send a check.
Send a check, is that it?
Yeah.
There we go.
There is no little PayPal button on the Rotarian Foundation page. So
Okay.
you have to send it by check or send it to me or give it to me and I'll process it. Now, we had about $1,200 in pledges and I think we actually received about 800.
All right, we're 2/3 of the way there, so thank you all. All right, up next. We'll, at our next meeting, we'll talk a little bit about all the wonderful things we get in return for that. I've got to have a little help on sort of taking full advantage of that. And Gowd, give us a couple minutes.
Thank you, Mark. But let me say one thing about David Scheffler. I was chatting with him, and then I bragged about how many countries I visited. I said, I've been to 49 countries. Then he said, oh, I've been to over 70. And then I said, you're the perfect man to join the club, my TRF committee. So he's in. He joined the committee. So he can do a lot. He knows a lot about the world. Thank you. All right. This is the wrap up of the last year and the beginning of this year. So quickly going to say how we did against the goals. How do we compare to other clubs in our district? And 2024 goals will come up next. But before I go on, we have a lot of recognition to be made. It probably takes 2-3 clubs. I have the Polio Plus pins and the certificates. Then Paul Harris Fellow, Paul Harris Society. All of these will be given. I'll be sending an email ahead of the time requesting the member to be here so that we'll do in 2-3 sessions. I hope all of you come. All right. We set goals. I published this. EREY, we met 100%. Also, we strive to get 100% of our club members to be Paul Harris Fellows. We achieved 90%, and we have 9 non-Paul Harris Fellows. And that is a good achievement, and I haven't given up, and I'm going to keep trying this year. Annual fund, we had a goal of 72. We achieved 59, 82%. Polio Plus, 98%. Well, I learned something that I didn't know. The checks apparently had to be in the bank by July 5th to get credit. And we had a lot of push the last week of June. And 5460 of the annual fund and 1285 of Polio Plus did not get recorded. So they are in this year. So next year, I know what to do. Don't leave the country month before and do all the campaigning in the beginning of the second half. That's what we're going to do. Thank you. Next one. Well, that looks like we haven't achieved our goal, but in reality, put in perspective, we are number 12 in the size among all the clubs in the district. We are number 3 in annual funds we raise, Polio Plus, as well as the total funds we contributed this year. So that's quite a achievement being number 3. So we should be proud. And more importantly, the foundation gives us back in the form of DDFs, designated district funds. It's based upon an average of last 3 years of annual fund share. I think we're going to get higher than last year so that we can use those funds for a global grant and district grant. So next one. We're going to consider what we already have a starting point and discuss the goals for next year with the board and publish it. And that is to be determined. Thank you very much.
Wow, that's a tremendous testimony to all of your generosity, to Gaud's hard work. So appreciate all of that. All right, so you may have known that we have transitioned to a quarterly newsletter, and Niall wanted to spend just a minute and a half talking just a quick minute about the quarterly newsletter. Niall, give that man a mic.
Our Noon Club newsletter is no longer, it's gone. What is new is the quarterly edition called Noon Club Quarterly. We are planning on printing our first edition in September. I'm looking for a human interest story from one of you that has a Rotary connection. If you have a great story to tell and you'd like to share your story for all of us to enjoy, please send it to me and I'll print it in the Noon Club Quarterly in September. Thank you.
Thank you, Niall. Now, I'm absolutely certain in this club, we have at least one cool human interest Rotary oriented story that we could come up with. So, all right, next week, we've got Michelle Morgan of Gene Morgan Insurance going to talk to us about, oddly enough, insurance. So very cool stuff. And this week, we've got Rachel Jones. Rachel Jones is the executive officer of the Alameda County Local Agency Formation Commission. So you probably all knew what LAFCO stood for, but that's exactly what it does. So she joined the commission in June of 2018, so just exactly 6 years ago. And she served before that as the interim executive officer and analyst for the Marin LAFCO. She also previously served as a donor stewardship advisor for SPUR, and SPUR is an advocacy group here in the Bay Area, think tank for urban planning. Ms. Jones holds a Bachelor of Science degree in urban planning from Cornell, wow, and is a graduate of Bishop O'Dowd High School in Oakland. After receiving her degree from Cornell, Ms. Jones lived abroad for 2 years in Germany and Italy. So you've got more than one country under your belt. People were bragging about how many places they visited, so we're well along there. And currently in her spare time, she also enjoys horseback riding. Yay! All right, everybody, a warm welcome for Rachel. Paul, do we have Splend on the, is he out? And Splend, do you want to say a couple words about Rachel? You've served on LAFCO now for a number of years.
Yeah, thank you, Mark. All right, is Rachel making her way up?
She is making her way up. Come on.
All right, so I am Rachel will tell you a little bit more what LAFCO does. I've been the public member of LAFCO for 18 years, and we're made up of 7 representatives, 2 mayors, 2 supervisors, 2 special district members. Currently, supervisors Halbert and Miley, mayors Marchand and Carla Brown from Pleasanton, and Ralph Johnson and Mary Ellen, who are on the other side on the Hayward side, and myself. And I represent all the citizens of Alameda County. In fact, we're supposed to represent all of Alameda County. What's unique, we are a governmental body. What's different about us is we're not supposed to be representing any particular jurisdiction, any city or the county itself, or any special district. We're supposed to take the interests of the entire county. And we're independent of every city, we're independent of the county. And with that, Rachel, I'm sure you'll do a lot better than me, but thanks you for the time, Mark.
Wonderful. Oops. See. Okay, hello everyone. Can you hear me okay? Wonderful. I love the energy in the room today. So someone has to invite me as a guest next meeting, please. I would like to kind of just give you a showcase of the wonderful world of LAFCO. Is anyone familiar with local agency formation commissions in the room? Not surprised by the few hands in the room. So you might have heard us, or you will hear more about us at city council meetings, but we are a kind of a form of government, and I'll just like to give you what I call a brief LAFCO 101, so you have a better understanding of what we do, and then when you do encounter us or hear about us, you'll be more aware and hopefully get involved. So LAFCOs came about in 1959 when Governor Edmund Brown Sr. Appointed a commission on metropolitan area problems. And the commission came about with a study, and they were trying to understand this misuse of land resources and kind of the complexity of local government jurisdictions. Let's see. Got it. So the governor kind of did this in response to a dramatic population growth in California and economic development. And this was, of course, after World War II. And then with this boom, there was a huge demand for housing, jobs, and public services. And to accommodate this, the state approved the formation of local government jurisdictions pretty much without little forethought on what would be the best governance structures. And this lack of coordination and adequate planning led to a lot of confusion, overlapping boundaries, inefficient jurisdictional and public services, and sometimes and oftentimes the premature conversion and loss of agricultural lands and open space. So the commission decided with the recommendations from the Metropolitan Area Problems Committee, they decided local government reorganizations were introduced in the state legislature in 1963. And this came about the creation of LAFCOs. So with LAFCOs, our legislative solution was that there was no state commission or we weren't going to be a statewide agency. We would retain local control by having no state appointments, and there would be an independent LAFCO in every county. And then the commission had the ability to adopt their own policies. And out of these recommendations, we had our guiding legislation called the Cortese-Knox Local Government Reorganization Act of 2000. And that mandated LAFCOs to kind of have a greater independence. We were able to make our own decisions. And also we were mandated to have what we call our planning tool, which I'll get into a little bit later, but it's called a sphere of influence. And we're supposed to do those every 5 years. And then we're also mandated to conduct studies called municipal service reviews. So the purpose of LAFCO, what are we about? Our mission is to preserve orderly growth. We're supposed to prevent urban sprawl, preserve agricultural and open space lands, ensure the efficient and effective delivery of public services. And then we are also said to be the state legislature's watchdog, overseeing local government agencies and trying to hold these agencies accountable. What can we do? So for our responsibilities, we can either create or eliminate new existing cities. We can also do the same for special districts. We can consolidate 2 or more agencies, including cities or special districts. We can merge an existing city into another one. We can add territory to existing cities or special districts through what we call as annexations, or we can remove territory from existing cities or special districts, and that is called detachments. And we also have the ability for service extensions of a city or an agency where they'll have a jurisdictional boundary, and we can go and allow cities to go outside their boundaries. And that's called an outside of area service extension. Now, we do have a commission, as Commissioner Splendorio mentioned, and that is an independent body that consists of 7 members. So we have 2 county board representatives, 2 city members, 2 special district members, and 1 member from the public. And then there's an alternate for each of those positions. And then these members, as we say, we're all required to think with their LAFCO hats. They're not to represent their elected positions. We want them to think under LAFCO policy because we often have a lot of huge boundary changes or annexations or things of that nature, where it would be easy for a city representative to think from their elected position or a county member to think from their elected position. But no, you have to think as a LAFCO representative. Now, as for our jurisdiction, we oversee counties, we oversee cities, and special districts. We do not oversee joint powers of authorities, school districts, thank goodness, county boundary lines, and agencies such as improvement or assessment districts. And then we have some planning authority. And for planning, we plan for orderly growth and development by considering proposed amendments on urban service areas of cities. And we work collaboratively with local agencies on growth, preservation, governance, and service issues by what we call municipal service reviews. And then prior to what we use as our planning tool, a sphere of influence of cities and special districts, we do this once every 5 years. And then we're also viewed as a regulatory agency. So we can regulate boundaries of cities and special districts. We can process boundary proposals to include annexations or detachments of cities or districts. We can incorporate or oversee the incorporation of new cities and the formation of new districts. We can dissolve districts and then also disincorporate a city, and other changes of organizations such as the consolidation or merger of a city or a district. So cities and districts are required to obtain LAFCO approval prior to these extensions of their boundaries. And then districts are also required to attain our approval. But we are prohibited to directly influence land use. But kind of as our own planning tool, we're directed and maintained to update spheres of influence for each city or district. And a sphere of influence, this denotes an agency's probable future boundary and service area. So a sphere, they're only found in California, and LAFCOs have the authority to develop and determine them. They are LAFCO's planning authority to maintain this orderly growth and development in the region. So how do they look? They usually expand a little outside of a city's or district's jurisdictional boundary. So to note that services will grow or continue, like for Alameda County, the majority of spheres are coterminous to a jurisdiction's boundary. So spheres may be smaller than an agency's jurisdictional boundary, which signals that the service area might be dissolved or decreasing. And that's where it's a signal to us to shorten or dissolve that boundary. So for this side photo, you can see in the gray, that's a city's jurisdictional boundary. And that dark black line, that's their proposed sphere of influence area. So that white area shows us within that black boundary that, hey, maybe in the future that city wants to annex that area next to that gray area. And they would go through LAFCO to make sure that we're processing it. We're making sure that it's not ag and open space land. It's just to denote to us that eventually, most likely, the city will come to LAFCO and they're going to have to figure out the capacity to plan for those areas. Do they have water? Do they have fire? Do they have police protection? Do they have the ability to annex it? But probably within that 5 to 10 years, it's our own little trajectory. So for the sphere, there's a few factors in determining kind of what would allow for a sphere to be changed. And we're looking at the present and planned land uses, including agriculture and open space, the probable need for public facilities and services, of course, the present capacity of public facilities and the adequacy of public services. And are there any social or economic communities of interest that we should consider when determining a sphere? Now, so we can telegraph the future service needs of a city or district, they are used to inform our decisions. So processing boundary proposals, looking at our municipal service reviews. But before we can even change a sphere, LAFCOs, we have to conduct what we call municipal service reviews. And these are it's a huge ordeal for us to prepare these. We're supposed to prepare them also, most likely with every 5 years. And they're a comprehensive study designed to better inform LAFCO, local agencies, and the community about the provision of municipal services. There are attempts to capture and analyze information about the governance structures and efficiencies of service providers. And they provide and help us identify opportunities for greater coordination, cooperation between agencies. And it's our prerequisite to determine a sphere before we do that. So for a municipal service review, we look at different things like growth in population projections, present and planned capacity for an agency to provide that service, the financial ability of a city or special district to provide services to an area. We also look at collaborative efforts, the opportunity for shared facilities. So, possibly it could be, a city is able to have some staff support another city, and that would be the more efficient option. If you look, this is a joint powers of authority, but Livermore, Pleasanton, with fire protection services, that would be a good example of those shared facilities. And then we also look at the accountability of agencies for the public. How are they being transparent? Postings on websites, is the information accessible? And there are other issues that LAFCO can determine in our studies. So as for our commission, we're looking at climate change and resiliency. How are agencies and cities planning for, flooding, cybersecurity, things of that nature? So that's another determination that we use. And then so for service reviews, they inform LAFCOs to look at orderly growth, at territory, and then help us determine future boundaries. They'll ultimately inform 3 actions. So it's the sphere of influence of affected agencies, future boundary changes therein, and if merited and only after lots of discussion, that would be a consolidation or a dissolution of another agency. There are no predetermined outcomes or conclusions with these municipal service reviews. It's a process-oriented activity, and this will ultimately dictate recommendations and related actions. Now, LAFCOs can conduct these studies in a number of ways. They can either be individually, just looking at one agency at a time, or it can be by a service need where we're just looking at wastewater itself, fire protection or police, sometimes health services, ambulance services, or we often do by region. So eventually, this commission, we're going to look at Tri-Valley as a whole, and we'll just do what we call a Tri-Valley regional study, encompassing all the types of services, park and recreation, police, Currently, we're looking at community services, which is park and recreation, street lighting, street maintenance, but we're also including broadband services in that. So LAFCO's determine kind of with these reviews what we're going to do after. And some LAFCOs hire a consultant to conduct these MSRs because that can take a lot of staff time, a lot of outreach with the agencies, and it can sometimes relieve a little political pressure that LAFCO might receive from the government agencies. It kind of gives an unbiased viewpoint. Sometimes some of these agencies feel when we have an outside consultant. So we do have a little authority. We have some informal authority with our studies, with our recommendations from MSRs, with our education, and we try and work as a facilitator. So if there's a problem between two cities, a city and a special district, LAFCO is sometimes looked at as that organization or that person entity who's going to kind of make sure that everyone's playing fair and trying to get everyone in the room together before, it becomes a huge issue or problem. We try and have that door open so that we can resolve anything like that. But we have formal authority as well. We approve and deny applications. We can impose our own terms and conditions on applications for different types of boundary amendments. And then we do have a filing with the Board of Equalization. And then we are an independent body, so commissioners make the final decisions. These decisions cannot be appealed, so LAFCO's decisions are legislative in nature and therefore are not subject to outside appeal process. We do adopt local policies and the executive officer is accountable only to the commission. And then we do have authority as an independent public agency. And for our funding, we are locally funded by the county, cities, and special districts that we oversee, and it's an equal 1/3 apportionments. We do have application and processing fees to help offset some of these expenses. We do use some of our reserves to kind of help some of the cities and special districts to make sure that they're not seeing huge annual increases in their fees from us. So we do provide a little cushion so that they're very incremental. And we are directed to adopt a budget each fiscal year. And then, of course, we're subject to, state laws like the Political Reform Act, Brown Act, and California Environmental Quality Act. Now, for some of our challenges, our current challenges, it's just our resources. We are required to do these huge, intense, comprehensive studies every 5 years. So that takes a lot of time. And sometimes a lot of LAFCOs fail at doing those studies every 5 years because it's just a lot of resources to allocate. So that's one challenge. We also have to look at what the state calls disadvantaged unincorporated communities. And these are disadvantaged unincorporated areas that are, that have an annual median household income that is less than 80% of the statewide median household income. And LAFCOs must ensure that these areas receive services according to the state definition. And Alameda LAFCO, for at least Alameda County, based on these income levels, our commission, we don't have any. But we might want to revisit this because that requirement is so low for the state, given that Alameda County is definitely higher. So we might want to increase that threshold to make sure that we can address some of the problems that maybe some areas are facing. There's a viability of smaller agencies. Now, this may pose a problem to some LAFCOs, given that if an agency can't provide a service any longer, LAFCOs may have to find another agency a smaller agency that's already providing a service or a great service. They don't have the access to funding to do that. So sometimes we might have to dissolve them. We might have to have another agency come in or consolidate in the future for these smaller agencies. And then there's repetitive agencies. So an issue for LAFCO, a major one for me while I was actually working at Marin LAFCO previously, you had maybe 6 wastewater agencies within, 20 miles, and they're all providing the same service. So this repetitive process was kind of the very reason LAFCO was created, but a lot of people love their local control, which I understand, but it sometimes can cost them in the end with higher fees. A lot of them are operating the same, so sometimes consolidation efforts might relieve that, but it's the outreach and education that we have to get across to the people. And then lastly, we have these areas called unincorporated islands. They're areas that are entirely or substantially surrounded by cities. So these usually pose a thorn in a lot of LAFCO sides because it can create a jurisdictional nightmare. Oftentimes when there's an emergency, you'll have city services provided to unincorporated territories, and that is not within a city's jurisdiction. LAFCOs are not allowed to bring an application or an annexation application to get rid of these. It has to be outreach. It has to be either city or residents to provide an application to us. So we can't do anything about it. But cities won't do it because that means they usually have to upgrade streets, sidewalks, lighting, city standards, and that costs money. So they're like, I don't want to do it. But residents also don't want to do this because they feel that it provides a more rural way of life and living, and they don't want to have to deal with certain setbacks. They prefer wider roads, less light pollution. So it's a constant education and outreach that we have to do to try and get rid of some of these unincorporated islands because it's just expending extra resources for a lot of these agencies. And then for some issues on the horizon, of course, it's the balance of preserving open space lands with the pressure of housing needs, advocating and maintaining infill development within cities as opposed to suburban areas that encourage sprawl, but it's cheaper land to build on. Of course, water needs such as infrastructure and sourcing. Our out-of-area service extensions, oftentimes they can promote urban sprawl outside of a city or agency jurisdiction, but provide urban services usually to out-of-way areas that can create development and away from city centers. Local agencies working together for shared facilities. It's always an issue for us trying to find opportunities for those shared resources. And then lastly, the adaptability of LAFCOs, themselves. If it needs to make sure that we're always trying to find innovative ways to navigate some of these political pressures by eliminating repetitive agencies or issuing consolidations. The state legislature might feel that we're not carrying out our duties all the time because it's a balancing act. We try and respect the residents or the cities, what they feel is right. And again, we're trying to work as a facilitator, but we're not moving fast enough. The state legislature might, mandate something else or, might even try to just say, hey, we don't even want to deal with you. We might get rid of you. So we have to think of ways, innovative ways, how we can improve the needs of the region. And that also includes housing needs and transportation needs. And so with that, I just want, if you want to learn more about LAFCOs, check out our California Association of Local Agency Formation Commissions. That's our huge guiding organization for the state. And then our website, www.alamedalafco.org. And on that website, you can look at some of our studies or our agenda reports and get to know a little bit more about that. So I will turn it back to President Mark Roberts, but thank you, everybody.
All right, we've got time for maybe 1 or 2 questions. Okay, we got one right here in the front. Can we get one of the famous Allens a microphone?
So I believe Livermore and Dublin are involved in the process right now. And I was wondering if you could describe a little bit about what was going on, what decision might be made when. And also you mentioned that your decisions are legislative acts and cannot be appealed, but presumably, since we all learned about legislative and administrative acts recently in Livermore, they can be referended. Is that correct? If somebody doesn't like it?
So for LAFCOs, we kind of have our own little appeal process, and it's called a reconsideration. So after our commission makes a decision, there's about a 30-day reconsideration, or what we have our own appeal process, where we would have to review the decision that we made. But for that Livermore and Dublin, I believe you're referencing. So Collier Canyon, there's a piece of property, the Crosby property, that is in unincorporated Alameda County. And it's kind of right on the Livermore and both Dublin's jurisdictional boundary. From what we know, it's a huge piece of land, and the city of Dublin has maybe some plans to develop that territory, while the city of Livermore is looking to keep a lot of that territory as open ag space land. So overall, either city can come to LAFCO and say, hey, we want to annex it, or the city of Livermore can say, hey, we want to annex that as a community separator. So this is something eventually that will come to LAFCO, and what we're asking right now, both cities, is to work and reach out an agreement to figure out what is the best use for that land. You can, make arguments both ways for that, but we're hoping that the cities can work it out amongst themselves before they come to LAFCO and have an agreement on that. Where, we also have to think with our LAFCO, with our determining factors, is that prime ag land? Should that be preserved? Or actually, is it best for that area to be developed? So we have to look at certain factors for our application process to make sure that we're using the best judgment for that parcel.
All right. Rachel, we have a little gift for you. It sounds like your job would require some amount of drinking after the long, hard day there. And this is a wonderful Ruby Hill wine we have for you. You are so well. If you didn't get your question answered, I'm sure Rachel will stick around for a little bit, and maybe, because she liked us so much, I heard that she liked us, maybe she'll come back. Yeah, and maybe she'll come to our 5 o'clock meeting, maybe at the end of the month. Maybe Sheila, why don't you talk to Rachel a little bit about that? So we'll have you do that offline, because I think we have a ticket to read, and someone get a microphone to the man with the ticket?
Yes, the winning ticket this week is 5424515.
515 are your last 3 digits.
Yeah.
515.
4515. Oh,
Did
we got
Did Irv win? All right, congratulations. Okay, all right. Next week, we are back here, and we're going to have Michelle Morgan talking to us about insurance and how complicated that world has become. Thank you all very much. Have a wonderful day.